Good morning. Today's video is just to go over a few problems from the review assignment on page 534. The assignment was number 2 and then 4 through 18. So I just selected a few because if we were in class together, I would ask you what problems you had troubles with and we would go over some. So I just picked out a few to do. So the way this works is, since this is a video, if you don't need to see number 5, you can just scoot on through and just skim and see what numbers I'm going to do and stop on the ones that you had trouble with. If you didn't have any trouble on this assignment and you got them all right, you don't have to watch any of this video today. So this is a Pythagorean theorem question. The directions will say just find x. And the reason I know this is Pythagorean theorem is because there are no angles, so I can't use trigonometry and I can't identify whether it's a special right triangle because I don't have these angles. So if you have labels for a, b, and c, this is a Pythagorean theorem question. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Identify what c is. Across from the right angle is always c. A and B don't matter because we are going to add them together after we square them, and you can add in any order. So 14 squared I believe is 196, and 16 squared I believe is 256. I probably should check those. 14 squared and 16 squared. Yep, and when you add those together, you get 452. 452 equals x squared, and then you square root. X is the square root of 452. Now, I would check that to see if it's a perfect square. And it is not. When you punch it into a calculator, square root of 452, you get this decimal number. So whenever it gives you an ugly decimal number, they're going to want you to simplify this. Instead of writing it as that decimal, break it down and simplify it. So you can do a traditional factor tree if you want, but I like to do them this way. I start with 2, and I do 452 divided by 2 is 226. And then 2 goes into that, and I just keep using 2 until I can't use 2 anymore. I get to 113. And 2 doesn't go into 113, and 3 doesn't go into 113. And I believe 113 is prime because 5 doesn't go into 113 and 7 doesn't go into 113. So I just try to keep dividing by primes and nothing goes in there. Now there's a little secret about when to stop. If nothing goes into 113 before the square root of 113, see if nothing before 10 goes into 113, then nothing after 10 is going to go into it either, which means it's prime. So you really only have to try the primes up to the square root of the number. Nothing else goes into 113. So these are my 3 numbers. And then you look for twins. These twins mean a 2 is going to come out. So 2 is going to come out, and the 113 stays in because it has no twin. So that is your answer to number 5. Okay, number 6. Number 6, this is 8, this is 15, this is x. Again, this is a Pythagorean theorem question because I have labels for a, b, and c, and I have no angles. So here's the Pythagorean theorem. 8 squared plus 15 squared equals x squared. This is 64, this is 225. This is 289. Always check and see if this is a perfect square. I believe 289 is. Square root of 289. See? 17. So then we don't have to do this whole breakdown process and finding numbers that go into 289. The answer is just 17. We've got ourselves a Pythagorean triple right there. 8, 15, 17 is a Pythagorean triple. Number 7. 7 looks like this. This is 12. This is x. Now, this was in the Pythagorean theorem section of problems. So since these are marked, this is also a 12. And you could go 12 squared plus 12 squared equals x squared. But if you happen to notice that since these legs are the same, that makes this a 45, 45, 90 right triangle. You don't have to do all that Pythagorean theorem work. So remember the labels on a 45, 45, 90 are A, and A radical 2. So 12, 12, and 12 radical 2. X is 12 radical 2. If you do all that Pythagorean theorem work with 12 squared plus 12 squared equals x squared, you're going to get 12 radical 2 at the end. This is just way faster. The downside to those three problems is that they gave us C is x each time. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes x is one of the legs. Like sometimes, like on this problem, x might be here. So we would go, let's say they gave us this was 17. It would be x squared plus 15 squared equals 17 squared. So thought it was kind of weird that all the problems they selected for review had the same x. X in the same location anyway, so that was strange. Anyway, here is number 10. This is x, this is 10, this is 45. Okay, this is not a Pythagorean theorem question. Although you could use Pythagorean theorem here because these would both be x. This is not a Pythagorean theorem question. This is a special right triangle question. So here's the labels. On a 45, 45, 90, these are a's. The two legs are a, and this is a radical 2. So this is one of those harder ones where they gave you the radical side, but there's no radical. So here's what we did. We took that number and divided by the number that's supposed to be in the radical. So we divide it by 2, and you get a 5. And then you stick the radical 2 on that 5, and that's what these legs are. So 5 radical 2, 5 radical 2, that's what these legs are. So whenever they give you the radical side and there's no radical, see it's the a radical 2 side, but it's just plain 10, you divide it by that number and then stick the radical on it. That's going to give you the other two sides. Number 12 is a special right triangle, but it's a 30, 60, 90 one. So this is 60, this is x, this is y, this is 14. Okay, here are the labels on a 30, 60, 90. This would have to be the 30. Across from the 30 is a. Across from the 60 is a radical 3. Across from the 90 is twice a. So they gave us this right here. They gave us twice a is 14. They gave us the doubled one. So that means the single one, regular a, is 7. So x is 7. And then if a is 7, then a radical 3 is 7 radical 3. So y is 7 radical 3. That's number 12. Number 13 was a word problem. And it said that there's a square garden, 50 feet on each side. And it says that we're going to stretch a hose from corner to corner. So here's the hose. And they want to know how long that hose is. And they want it rounded to the nearest tenth. So in a square, since all these corners are right angles, and this angle is bisected, that happens in every single rhombus in the world, and a square happens to be a rhombus, that 45 is cut in, or that 90 is cut in half to make a 45. So it's really a 45, 45, 90 question. These are A, and A. So this is A radical 2, which makes this 50 radical 2. That's how long that hose is. But when you go to Lowe's and you buy a hose, you don't tell them, I want a hose that's 50 radical 2 feet long. That would be crazy. So they ask you to round this to the nearest tenth. You grab a calculator and you type in 50 radical 2. 70.7. So the hose is approximately 70, what did it say, nearest tenth? Yep, 70.7 feet long. Okay, number 14. I picked out 3 more. So number 14. 14, they ask you for some trig ratios. This is A, this is 18, this is 2 radical 19, this is 20. And they want the sine of A, they want the cosine of A, and they want the tangent of A. So here's a little memory device, SOHCAHTOA. I noticed that some of you are writing this little memory device like this, I think some of y'all have some really good tutors that have nice ways of remembering things. So SOHCAHTOA can be written like this, and this reminds you of what these fractions are. So in relation to A, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. The opposite side would be here. Let me put a label on there. This is opposite. This is the adjacent side. This is the hypotenuse. So in relation to A, opposite would be 2 radical 19. The hypotenuse is the hypotenuse regardless of what reference angle you're using. It's 20. And then 2 over 20 can be reduced. So square root of 19 over 10. If you left it 2 radical 19 over 20, that's the right answer. It's just unreduced. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. The adjacent side is 18. The hypotenuse is still 20. That reduces to 9/10. And the tangent of A is the opposite side, 2 radical 19, over the adjacent side, which is 18. 2/19 reduces to 1/9. So that is your tangent. Okay, these are just select problems from the review assignment. Again, if I'm doing problems you don't need to see, then just zoom on through them to the next problem. If you got them all right, you probably are not watching me right now. Okay, here's our angle of reference. Even if we don't know the angle, that's our angle of reference. We're going to decide whether this is a sine problem or a cosine problem or a tangent problem. And so since I have the opposite side labeled, and this is across from the right angle always points to the hypotenuse. Since I have opposite and hypotenuse, this is a sine problem. Because if you look at this little memory device here, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So this would be a sine problem. You always put the angle next, even if you don't know the angle. Sine of the angle is opposite over hypotenuse. Whenever that angle is missing, that's when you use the second button. So you go second, sine, and then you type in this fraction. 12 divided by 22. 33 degrees. X is approximately 33 degrees. Whenever that is missing, that's when you type in second, sine, and your screen will say this right here. And then you type in that fraction. And that gives you the answer. And then the last one that I picked out was number 18. It's a word problem. And it says that Linda's flying a kite and she lets out 45 feet of string. So here's Linda's kite. She lets out 45 feet of string. It says she anchors it to the ground, so let's tie that thing to the ground. And it says that the kite is at an angle of elevation of 58 degrees. So see, here's the ground. Angles of elevation come from a horizontal and go up to something. So this is 58 degrees. And the question is, how high off the ground is that kite? So we're looking for this distance. Here's our angle of reference. This is the opposite side. This is the hypotenuse. Opposite and hypotenuse is sine. So sine of 58 degrees. Unlike number 17, we know the angle. So sine of 58 equals opposite over hypotenuse. And then we're going to solve this thing. Whenever the x is on the top, we multiply. And when you multiply, put the normal number in the calculator first. So 45 times sine of 58. And it gives you 38. It's measured in feet, so x is approximately 38 feet. That's how high that kite is up in the air. Okay, so that's all for today. Just some select problems from the review assignment. I hope that review assignment went well. And if we were in school, we would be having a test over Chapter 8 today. So as soon as I know how I'm going to accomplish that, I will let you know. But for now, hold on to this assignment. Keep it in your binder. Probably going to collect assignments in a portfolio that I'll share. I'll give you guys like a list of things that should be in the portfolio. So for now, just make sure you're hanging on to all of your work. Always put a title on it so you know what it is. I'd put a date on it so you know when it was assigned. It'll help you organize it better when we get to assembling this into a portfolio. So thank you guys for listening, and have a great Friday, and have a happy spring break next week. Okay, bye.